Hi. We are starting our review of syntax for next exam. So, here I plan to give you an overview of what was discussed during the course. Of course, I'll discuss something briefly because we have not much time, but the idea is to give those who missed some class or who need to review some concepts uh, give them a better explanation than simply sharing the slides. So we saw that syntax denotes the study of order and the relationship of words in the sentence, in the clause. Yeah. So syntax deals with the relation of words to each other as the component parts of a sentence or a clause, and with their proper arrangement to express clearly the intended meaning. So syntax means order, arrangement, and this is what syntax will deal with. Now, our fundamental distinction is the distinction between sentence and clause. We must have this clear in our minds. Okay. So we distinguish two main types of sentence: a clausal sentence, which is a sentence of only one clause, and a compound sentence, which has at least two clauses, yeah, which has the form of two or more coordinated clauses, usually joined by a coordinator, and, or, but, and so on. So take a look at A. Sue went to London last week is a clausal sentence. We have only one verb, one action, okay, and there is no coordination. Now when I say Sue went to London last week and her father went with her, here we have a compound sentence, okay, composed of two clauses and joined together. They are joined together by the coordinator and. Let's take a look at the difference of sentence between sentence and clause. We state that the hotel which you recommended is a clausal sentence even though it contains two clauses, because one clause which you recommended is part of the other rather than separate from it. What does that mean? The hotel which you recommended refers back to the hotel, yeah, we are talking about. Uh, so uh, One clause, as I said, which you recommended, is part of the other rather than separate from it. More specifically, the which you recommended is part of the noun phrase the hotel which you recommended. So to conclude that, you may do the following. We stayed at the hotel. Which one? The hotel which you recommended. So the hotel which you recommended is the noun phrase. The larger clause is thus, we stayed at the hotel which you recommended, and this does not constitute the whole sentence, like that in Sue went to London last week. The fact that two types of sentence are distinguished in terms of clauses imply that we take the clause to be a more basic unit than the sentence. Okay, so keep this in mind. The clause is a more basic unit than the sentence, which reflects the fact that in speech it tends to be more difficult to determine the boundaries between sentences than the boundaries between clauses. And then we started during the semester talking about canonical clauses. I'll try to summarize this. Okay, so we saw that the simplest structure of a clause is that one given by the subject, the verb, and what we decided to call, to simplify the thing, the complement. So SVC, subject verb complement. And then the canonical clause will follow that structure, and we'll work with the canonical clause to make it easier to analyze clauses, and those who are not canonical will try to find a way to turn them into canonical. Okay, so let's take a look at canonical clauses. We can describe the structure of clauses most economically if we distinguish between the most basic and elementary kinds of clause, as I said, the canonical clauses. The idea is that we can present the analysis more clearly if we begin with canonical clauses, describing them directly, and then deal in turn with the various kinds of non-canonical clause, describing them indirectly in terms of how they differ from canonical. Okay, so let's take a look between canonical and non-canonical clauses. What makes a clause canonical? Well, canonical clauses, like in one, for example, you have a column. Here you have, sorry, canonical over here in the column on the left. I think you don't see my mouse, and non-canonical on the right. Okay, so take a look at one. She has read your article. This is canonical. She has not read your article is not canonical. So the first thing we conclude is that canonical clauses are always positive. They are never negative. In number two, Sue is coming for dinner is canonical. As in B, is Sue coming for dinner? So we have the difference between an affirmative clause and an interrogative. So we can conclude that canonical clauses are always affirmative. Number 3, A. Canonical, they knew the victim. In B, she said that they knew the victim. So canonical clauses must always be direct. Okay, they are in direct speech rather than in indirect speech. Sentences or clauses, clauses in indirect speech are always non-canonical. Number 4, he missed the train. And in B, either he missed the train or it is late. So canonical clauses are never coordinate. They are neither coordinate nor subordinate. In B, we have either or joining two different clauses, two different ideas. Okay, and in 5, the secretary took the key. In B, we have the key was taken by the secretary. Now, what's the difference? B is in passive voice, so we can conclude that canonical clauses are always active. Then we have a list of the features for a canonical clause summarized here in this slide. They are positive, they are declarative, they are main clauses, never subordinate, they are non-coordinate, okay, that's why either or is non-canonical, and they are active, never passive. Canonical clauses package the information in the grammatically most basic way. Thus, I have now read most of them is canonical, but most of them I have now read is not, because there is a problem with the order, and syntax is all about order. So we have the subject, the auxiliary verb, the adverb, the verb, plus the object, and this makes this clause canonical. Now, the object plus the subject plus the auxiliary plus the adverb plus the verb is a non-canonical order. So canonical clauses always preserve the subject, verb, object order. In all examples, the non-canonical clauses differ in their structure from canonical clauses, but this is not always so. In 3b, 3b, she said that they knew the victim. The subordinate clause is introduced by that, but we could omit this that, giving she said they knew the victim, where the underlined clause is identical with 3a, they knew the victim. She said they knew the victim. They knew the victim. Nevertheless, it is still subordinate and then non-canonical. It is subordinate by virtue of being complement of the verb said, but the subordination happens not to be marked in the internal grammar structure of the clause itself. This that can be omitted according to some grammar rules, but subordination is still there. A clause is non-canonical if it lacks at least one of the mentioned properties, that is, being positive, declarative, main clause, non-coordinate, or active. It may of course lack more than one characteristic, okay? But if it lacks at least one, then I know it's non-canonical. Okay, and then I gave this exercise in the class, whether you would tell me if clauses are canonical or not. So my family came for Christmas. Canonical. This is the house that I bought is non-canonical exactly because of the coordinator. Emma plays the piano very well. Canonical, subject, verb, complement. Jesus, how brilliant she is. It's non-canonical because it's an exclamative, okay, and canonical clauses are never exclamations. Sue isn't happy with her performance is non-canonical because of isn't, yeah, of the negative feature. What a shame you couldn't do it. It's also non-canonical because it's exclamative, as it happens in D. Yeah. Mike, do it as soon as possible. It's non-canonical because of being imperative. And there's no money in my wallet is canonical. Although you may say, okay, but there's no money in my wallet. Isn't it a negative? No, it's not. There's no money. This no does not make the sentence a negative sentence. Okay, so this is what we discussed about canonical and non-canonical clauses. Now we are talking about the parts of speech. In the parts of speech, as we saw, they are 9. There are 9 primary word classes or parts of speech, but we decided not to approach the interjections, so we are dealing with 8 parts of speech. Okay, and they are the determinative, the, some, a, and, okay, like in the dog barked, I've got a sore knee, we need some milk. The adjective, he's very young, I've got a sore knee, it looks easy. The noun, the dog barked, now the emphasis in the word dog, Sue or you, they're classified as noun. You may say, okay, but I love you. I and you are pronouns. Yes, we are grouping nouns and pronouns together because they play about the same function in the clause. Okay. The coordinators and, or, but, however, and so on. We saw him and Pat hurry or will be late. It's cheap but good. The adverbs clearly, extremely, very, and so on. As in, she spoke clearly, you're extremely fit, he works very hard. The prepositions, you're mostly familiar with them, in, from, at, on, yeah, as in, it's from uh, your uncle, he's in the garden, we went to Paris, and so on. The verb, uh, is, left, want, play, do, whatever. And the subordinator, that, whether, and so on. Now, to memorize these 8 parts of speech, there's a hint. Yeah, I don't want you to take it so seriously, but there's a way to memorize it. It's the sentence in the lower part of the slide. NASA discovered a very cold planet. Well, with these initials, you can somehow memorize better the word classes or the parts of speech. Now, noun, adjective, subordinator, adverb, determiner, verb, coordinator, and prepositions. Okay. For these 8 parts of speech, there are 6 deriving kinds of phrases. the verb phrase, the adverb phrase, the prepositional phrase, the determinative phrase, the adjective phrase, and the noun phrase. Okay. So in the following examples, the phrase is enclosed in brackets and the head underlined so that you can see what it means by verb phrase. Well, what is a verb phrase? It is a phrase. It's part of a clause in which the head, in the case of the verb phrase, is a verb. In the case of the adverb phrase, it's an adverb. In the case of the prepositional phrase, the head is a preposition, and so on. So you can download the slides and check out the examples. Now, when we talk about canonical clauses, we are talking about a very basic and simple structure. It's the subject-predicate structure. Like in the students got ready for the test. The green part is the subject, and the blue part, got ready for the test, is the predicate. My paper was approved for publication. Again, we have my paper as the subject, and was approved for publication as the predicate. Now, how can we analyze this sentence? It was obvious that he was lying. Is it canonical? How can we turn it into canonical if it's not? Okay, so this is non-canonical. It was obvious that he was lying is not canonical because of the that. Yeah, that works as a coordinator. So how can we get rid of this that? Well, putting that he was lying in the position of the subject, and then we have that he was lying was obvious. Now the subordinate clause is put as the subject of the clause. Now this subject is classically considered to be the performer of the action, and we saw in the class that this definition works well for action verbs, but not for state of being verbs. Let's take a look at a video. Okay, let's see the video again so that you can reflect about the difference of doing an action and being in a certain state. So let's see the video. Where's the video? It's over here.
If you're listening to this lecture, you probably know how to speak English pretty well already. I'm using many complicated sentences, and they're difficult to understand if you're just beginning English. So you might say, well, why do we need to go back to the basics, even if it's just for a moment? Well, if we learn how the different parts of sentences work together, we can think more clearly about trickier sentences which aren't so clear. Alright, so let's take probably one of the easiest sentences I can come up with. John teaches. Alright? Now if I ask people, well, identify the parts of it. If I ask people to identify the parts of this, they might say, well, this is a noun and this is a verb. And they'd be right. But that's just identifying what type of word this is, right? It's like saying that's a maple tree and that's a rose, right? It doesn't tell me how these words work together, right? What function they play in this sentence. By the way, this most simple type of sentence is often called a clausal sentence because it's basically the same thing as a clause. Now, you might not know what a clause is yet. I will treat it within a few lectures from now, but for now, just know that it's the most basic type of sentence that you can pretty much come up with, aside from very short sentences like ouch, which are not what we're talking about. So, John teaches. What is John? What does this noun actually do? Well, it is the subject, right? Nouns can do lots of things in sentences. They can be the objects or they can be the subjects. In this case, this noun is the subject, right? Now, what is this verb doing? Well, this verb is acting as the predicate. And this is our definition of a very simple sentence of a clause, is that it's a group of words that consists of a subject and a predicate. Now we need to know what these things actually are, and that's going to be the topic of the next 2 lectures. Right now, in this first one, we'll just talk about what subjects are. Now people often say, well, subjects do the verb, right? The subject does the verb. Well, that's certainly true with John teaching, and even with a little bit more complicated sentences like I ate an apple. It's true here too. Who did the eating? Well, I did it. I did the eating, right? So here the subject is doing the verb. However, let's turn this around and make it passive, right? The apple was eaten. Well now, what can apples really do? Well, apples can grow and apples can rot. Do apples have any choice about this eating business? Well, no, they don't. They don't do anything to do with eating, right? They get eaten. So in this case, the apple is not functioning as the thing that does the verb. Instead, some people will say it's the topic. And well, that seems to be a little bit stronger because it's true for both of these, right? I'm the topic of this sentence. What did I do? Well, I ate an apple. The apple is the topic of this sentence. What happened to the apple? Well, the apple was eaten. Now that's good to some extent, but let's take a look at a few situations where it doesn't quite hold up. Or maybe it partially holds up. Let's take a look at one where it partially holds up. It's nice. It's nice to have you as a friend. Well, already this isn't quite as simple as it could be, but let's just take a look at how this subject works. It's nice. Well, what's nice? It's nice to have you as a friend. But what is it? Well, actually, it looks forward to this verb here, to have, right? Another way of saying this sentence is, having you as a friend is nice. Alright, so I guess having you as a friend is the topic of this sentence, but still it's kind of confusing to have this pronoun stuck out front. Alright, well, you say you can sort of solve that one, but I've got one that's a little bit harder to solve. How about this one? Not it's nice too, but it is nice, or sorry, it is raining. How about that one? Here we go. It is raining. Now you might say, well, surely it refers to something. But what? I can't say the weather is raining. That's not a very good sentence. We don't say weather is raining. And we don't say clouds are raining. It is raining. Well, what is it? I don't know. All right? That's the truth. It is raining. It's one of these funny English sentences. So English has these funny subjects which don't do the verb and they aren't really the topic, right? So I think we started off knowing what a subject was. And you can view it kind of like an onion maybe, right? We looked at this onion and we say, well, I know what an onion is, but just to make sure, let's peel off this outer layer and make sure that it's an onion. So we have a smaller onion. And we keep on peeling our onion until, poof, it vanishes at the end. Does this mean there was nothing to a subject and there's no such thing as a subject? Certainly not, but we have to define it grammatically in English. And what I mean by that is I need to look at how it works in a sentence. Well, there's a couple clues that a certain word or a certain phrase is a subject, okay? One of these clues is that it usually comes before the verb. Usually before the verb. That should be an H. Usually before the verb. So I could use a sentence like, he is nice, right? He is nice. Is the verb, and he is the subject. The subject does indeed come before the verb. He is nice. Is there anything else? Well, yeah, the verb and the subject and the verb usually have to agree. Not usually, they do have to agree. There's an agreement between them, right? What do I mean by agreement? Well, I mean, if we change the number of people involved here, change it to they, need a bigger T there, they, my goodness, all right, they, nice, we need to change this verb, right? It's not they is nice, it's they are nice, right? So Subjects, when you change their number, cause the verb to change as well sometimes, all right? Sometimes it will end up being the same form of the verb, but the verb needs to agree with this subject, all right? So that's another marker of a subject. Another one is if we look at, when we look at questions, particularly closed questions, that's questions with a yes or no answer, do they invert the order? Do they change the order around? Well, in this case, certainly, yeah. If we look at that first sentence, he is nice. The question form is he nice? The question of this is, are they nice? So these are the patterns that subjects fall into. And this is a more reliable way to determine what the subject is than to simply say that the subject does the verb or is the topic of the verb. However, I must admit, these two guidelines are often true. The subject is often the thing indeed that does do the verb or is the topic of the sentence. But it's important to realize that that's not really how we define it. It's the thing that comes before the verb, basically. All right, in the next lecture, we'll look at the predicate and how it works.
Okay, so after the video, let's turn back to our next topic, which is predicates. So sentences composed by one clause, clause of sentences, can be split into subject and predicate. As we saw in the video, if we take the case of they study, yeah, they is the subject, study is the predicate, and it's also the verb. Study is then, it's not hard to distinguish it, that's the head of the predicate since it's the only word, the predicator. Now the predicator is the word, as we saw in the video, in charge of the predicate. In this case above, the predicator has nothing to take care of. Thus, the predicate is made up of only one predicator. In I am a student, we have a more complex case. I as the subject, am a student as the predicate, and am is in charge of the predicate. Am is the predicator. A student is a noun phrase that works as a noun. In I bought a car, I is the subject. It's hard to say I is. I is the subject, the pronoun I, and bought a car is the predicate. A car is a noun phrase, and bought is in charge of the predicate, is in charge of what I bought. Okay. Now, what's the big difference between a student and a car if they are both noun phrases? Well, in I am a student refers back to I. Who is a student? The pronoun I. I am a student. I'm in a relationship of equality between the pronoun I and the noun phrase a student. So I can say it describes I. It's a predicative complement. Now, predicative complements describe something else in the sentence. In I bought a car, well, what's the relationship between I and a car? I'm certainly not a car. A car is what I bought. So even though being the noun phrase, a car plays the role of the object of my action of buying something. As we saw in the example of they are nice, yeah, they and nice are in a relationship of equality. They, who is nice? They are nice. They and nice are the same element. Those who I'm talking about are nice. So it's a predicative complement, a subjective predicative complement. Now take the case of I gave him a book. Okay, I, the subject, gave him a book is the predicate. The predicator is gave. Okay, and a book is certainly the object I gave him, sorry. Uh, Now, what is the function of him in this case? Now we must recall what we call him, her, uh, these pronouns uh, in the classification, in the grammatical classification we make of them. Well, we learn him, her, uh, me, give me this as objective pronouns. And why? Exactly because him indicates the direction where the giving goes. So the function of him is the function of an indirect object. We drove her crazy. Again, what is the function of her? Is this still the direction of the action? Yes, it is. Remember how we call him, her, them, us objective pronouns. Okay, so in this case, we cause her to change her mood. Her is the direct object uh, towards which we acted. Okay, so note that the subject is doing something to her. Okay, driving her crazy. So we have 5 basic canonical structures that we must remember, and they are here in this slide for you. So subject plus predicate, the example is I run. Subject plus predicate plus predicative complement, I am a runner. And these are the intransitive clauses about the subject, clauses about the subject. And then we have subject plus predicate plus direct object, I teach English. Okay. Subject plus predicate plus indirect object is always possible. The next one, subject predicate plus indirect object plus direct object, I teach him syntax. And subject plus predicate plus direct object plus predicative complement, I made them angry. And these clauses in green are the transitive clauses. Intransitive and transitive clauses can be joined together to form more complex sentences. These clauses will be connected by coordinators and subordinators that we also call conjunctions, and then we'll have compound sentences. All clauses are sentences. Okay, so keep this in mind. Our clauses are sentences, but sentences can have more than one clause, and then they are compound. I watched the game and it was exciting has an and working as a coordinator. I ate a snack because I was hungry has because as a subordinator. If you drop and put a period, the meaning is the same. But if you drop because, meaning is lost. And that's the difference between coordination and subordination. Dropping the coordinator, substituting it by punctuation or something the like, may preserve the meaning, but you can never do this with a subordinator. And finally, we come to verbs. Well, when we talk about verbs, the first thing that comes to our minds is the case of inflection. Verb inflection, because verbs have a number of inflectional forms that are permitted or required in various grammatical constructions. So the present tense form takes, for example, can occur as the verb of a canonical clause, whereas the past participle taken cannot. She takes care, but not the ungrammatical she taken care. So the great majority of verb lexemes have 6 inflectional forms that we can see in this chart. The preterite, she checked the figures herself. The third singular present, she checks the figures herself. The plain present, they check the figures themselves. The plain form, she may check the figures herself. The gerund participle, the famous ing, she's checking the figures herself. and the past participle, she had checked the figures herself. Although we have distinguished 6 different inflectional forms, there are only 4 different shapes: checked, checks, check, and checking. So the first conclusion that we come is that form and shape are different instances in syntax. Okay, the form is more related to the function they play in the clause. The shape is more related to the way, to the spelling of the verb. Okay, for example, checked can be either the preterite, she checked the figures herself, or the past participle, she had checked the figures herself. And these verbs are certainly in the same shape, but they are different forms. So by shape we mean the spelling or pronunciation. Thus the preterite and the past participle of the lexeme check have the same shape, as do the plain present tense and the plain form. This is true to all regular verbs. Okay. Now there are a good number of irregular verbs where the preterite and past participle do not have the same shape. Take a look at the preterite in "she took the message." Now the past participle is "the message was taken by her." So it's not hard. I'd say it's very easy to decide whether any particular instance of the shape check is a preterite form or a past participle. What you need to do is ask which form of a verb like take, for example, an irregular verb like take, would be needed in the construction in question. So let's consider this case. She may have checked the figures herself. Okay, now we have checked preterite and we have checked participle, past participle. Well, let's change checked by the verb to take. And she may have took or she may have taken. We see that the correct form is she may have taken. So in this case, this checked in she may have checked the figures herself is a case of past participle. Another example, I'm not sure whether she checked the figures herself or not. Let's substitute it by take. Yeah, the verb to take. I'm not sure whether she took the figures herself or not. In this case, it's a preterite. So let's review the 6 verb forms. Verb form is not verb tense, and this must be true for you. There must be no doubt about this. Verb tenses come up as a combination of the 6 basic forms, which are the preterite, yeah, coincident with a type of past tense, yeah, the present tense forms, yeah, including the third person singular form, okay, and the plain present form, which indicates that it is identical with the morphological base of the lexeme, or what we call in most didactic books, the textbooks, as the infinitive without to. The plain form, also identical with the base, but it's not truly a past tense form, a present tense form, sorry. It is used in 3 constructions: in the imperative, in the infinitival, and the subjunctive. Okay, and the infinitival construction is very often marked by to, but it is also found without to after such verbs as can, may, will, and do, and also make. Okay, so you can go back to the slides and check the examples. And the plain form, okay, identical with the base of the lexeme, as I said, but it's not a present tense form. It's used in 3 constructions. Like, there are 2 major factors that distinguish the plain form from the plain present. The case of be, which has 3 present tense forms instead of the usual 2, is, am, and are, and all of these are different in shape from the plain form of be. which is be. It is plain present form that appears in these three constructions shown here. Be quiet. It's better to be safe than sorry. I will be ready in time. And it's essential that she be told. Although these constructions in the subjunctive look weird for foreign students of the language, it's the way that we construct the subjunctive. And the plain present has to agree in third person singular. The plain form does not take any inflection. So let's compare. She checks the figures herself. She will check the figures herself. In the first case, she checks, not she check. In the second case, she will check, not she will checks. Although I have a she, the will eliminates the need of inflecting the verb check for third person singular. She is a third person singular pronoun, but will comes before the verb to check, so it will come in its plain form. The gerund participle, which always ends in the suffix ing. Traditional grammar distinguishes two forms with this subject, the gerund and the participle, and we group them together to discuss. Yeah. An example of the use of this in the gerund, of the suffix in the gerund, is walking late at night can be dangerous. In the present participle, we have people walking late at night must be careful. Which of the above is the well-known present continuous? Well, people walking late at night must be careful. A gerund is comparable to a noun, while a participle is comparable to an adjective. There is, however, no verb in English that has distinct form for the constructions above, so we have a single form, and the name gerund participle indicates that it covers both traditional categories. Okay. And the past participle, which in language institutes, when I'm teaching present perfect, I normally ask them to call the past participle column the perfect, and I'll tell you why in some moments, which is used in two main constructions, the perfect, as I said, and passive voice. So the perfect, she has checked the figures, and the passive voice, the figures must be checked by the boss. The perfect is a past tense marked by the auxiliary verb have, while the most straightforward cases of the passive involve the auxiliary verb be. So we retain the traditional term past participle, though the past component of meaning applies just to the perfect construction. This is due to the fact that most dictionaries and grammar books still refer to it like that. And let's finally take a look at our next topic and final topic for the exam, which are auxiliary verbs. So auxiliary verbs can be split into two big groups, two basic groups, which are the modal ones and the non-modal ones. Well, if you know what an auxiliary verb is and what is its function in a clause, if you memorize the non-modal ones, all the others are the modals. So the non-modals are be, have, and do. The modals are can, may, must, will, shall, ought to, need, dare, could, might, would, should, which are the preterite of those above. Yeah, of can, may, will, and shall, respectively. So we have two most frequent situations in which we use these verbs. The first one is in the inversion to ask questions, when you invert subject and auxiliary verb. And the second one, when you have to construct a negative sentence in which this auxiliary verb will take the not. So I'll skip the text and go straight forward to the examples. She has taken the car is the declarative. Has she taken the car is the interrogative and not took she the car. So the inversion happens between has and she. So if the declarative does not contain an auxiliary, as in 1b, she took the car, it is necessary to insert the auxiliary do so that inversion can apply. In fact, the case in 1b is not that do is not here in the sentence, because when I emphasize the fact that she took the car, I can say she did take the car. Yeah, she really took the car, or she did take the car. So the did is somehow hidden in this structure, and when you have to ask the question, you have to make it appear and invert it. So we have the construction, did she take the car? As you already know, this do has no meaning, and it's simply inserted to satisfy the grammatical rule requiring an auxiliary verb. Again, if there is no auxiliary in the positive, do must be inserted to form the negative. She did not take the car. Auxiliaries, but not lexical verbs, have negative forms ending in the suffix n''t or not. They are the only ones who can take a not after them. Okay, and then in the slides you have plenty of examples to prove this way of distinguishing. Now we have to discuss be, do, and have. Yeah. Discussing be, we have three uses of be that can be distinguished. Yeah. Be as a progressive marker. For example, in the present continuous, they are watching TV, or in the present perfect continuous, I've been working all morning. Be as a passive marker, preparing a past participle verb. It was taken by Joe, or he may be arrested. And be in a situation which we call copula. She was a friend of his, or that is very likely. In this case of copula, it means that be is playing both roles of a lexical verb that is a non-auxiliary, a verb with a meaning in itself, and of an auxiliary verb. Okay, so I'll advance a little bit in the slides. Yeah. And now let's talk about have. Those slides I advanced are just detailed examples of how this happens, each feature happens in the clauses, and then you can download these slides at the system of the university in SIGA. Okay, now let's talk about have. This verb belongs to both lexical and auxiliary classes because I have, for example, I can use it in a lexical way. I have a car, and I can use it as part of a verb tense. Have you taken the car? Now, in she had a swim, it is a lexical verb. For the interrogative and negative counterparts are did she have a swim or she didn't have a swim. The auxiliary uses are seen below. Take a look. The perfect marker, he has broken his leg, or he may have taken it yesterday. So in both cases, has and have prepare a verb that's to come in the participle, in the past participle. The second uses as static have. She has enough credit, and we have to invite them all. I'll talk about the differences between static and dynamic have in no time. And as a perfect marker, is marked by the auxiliary have and the past participle, as I said. So it is best regarded as a secondary past tense, the primary past tense being the inflectional preterite. Okay. Note, for example, that the preterite is found only in finite constructions such as he took it yesterday, so it can't occur after may. And why? Because may takes an infinitival clauses complement. That's why perfect have is used instead of instead as in one B. He may have taken it yesterday. Since have itself can inflect for tense, 1a he has broken his leg is doubly marked for tense. It is past with present, the past being marked by the lexeme have, and the present by the inflection on it. He has broken his leg. Okay, so I have here as an auxiliary, but agreeing with he. This reflects the fact that while the event of his breaking his leg is located in past time, it is seen as having a relevance to the present, and that's what we normally explain students when we are teaching the past perfect, the present perfect. That present perfect is past with present, past event with present consequence. The most likely scenario in the case of he has broken his leg is that now, with his leg broken, he is incapacitated. So the present tense component also explains why it's not normally possible to add an adjunct like yesterday. He has broken his leg is yesterday is normally a contradiction, because when I use the present perfect, I'm putting the focus in the action, in the thing that happened, and not when it happened. Now, what is the static have? Have here in she has enough credit and we have to invite them all. It denotes a state. Unlike that of she had a swim, which is dynamic, denotes an event. When I say I have credit, having credit is a state of being. I can have credit today. I may not have credit tomorrow. It's the state I am. We have to invite them all. It's a state of being. It's we have to invite them all now, but as we invite them, we don't have to invite them anymore. So usage is divided as to whether static have is an auxiliary or a lexical verb. Those who say she has not enough credit or have we to invite them all are treating it as an auxiliary, while those who say she does not have enough credit and do we have to invite them all are treating it as a lexical verb. So we can conclude that in modern English, in standard English, we learn the tendency is to treat have as a lexical verb. Many people use both constructions, though the lexical verb treatment has been gaining ground. Okay, and then with this we finish our review on syntax. I hope you enjoyed. I know it was a very brief review, and well, it was what I could do for such a little time I had, but I hope, sincerely hope you have a very nice exam. Okay, so bye, see you in the next video, guys.